Alrighty, here we go again. Cranking it along with Two Takedown Tribe, our little wrestling combat sports podcast, hailing from upstate New York, focusing on New York and Pennsylvania wrestling, the world as a whole, from youth to Olympic and everything in between. Today's episode, we have our first conversation with some Division III people, and we have the RIT Tigers out of Rochester, New York. Very quality program at Division III level. We have their coach, Coach Jason Bovenzi, with us, and three of their fine wrestlers on their squad. Two outgoing seniors and/or graduates in Chris Horton and Austin Lamb, and then an upcoming senior, I believe, if I'm not wrong, in Josh Post. And the uniqueness of why I had Coach grab these guys is they're all kind of local where they came out of their high school programs here to where we produce from in the border town, border area of New York and Pennsylvania, the Twin Tiers, the Section 4, District 4, where it all meets in the middle. And so Austin hails from the Tioga Tigers, very prominent program in his day and continuing now, just up the road from where I sit in Waverly. Chris is from the bordering area of Athens, Pennsylvania. The Athens Wildcats is where he came through. And Josh comes from a historical program in Newark Valley in recent years, just up the road above Owego, New York. So they're just both, they're all three are great guys here from where they came through. And we're just going to discuss them a little bit of their time at RIT. So welcome, guys. I appreciate it. I know it's finals, maybe not week, but we're approaching that time of the year. I appreciate it. Welcome.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, and just to in full disclosure, Coach Bovenzi is a college teammate of myself, so we'll have some common interaction to the people at home watching throughout, and eventually we'll let these young men go because they do have a lot of academics. But Coach, gosh, you're 7 years into you taking the reins. Am I right? As the head coach of the program.
Yep.
Yeah. And from watching from afar, people in these guys' hometowns watching their personal careers, me watching from afar, knowing you, it wasn't exactly a full cupboard when you started. A program that's been existed, and you and your staff have really got some cultural momentum, I believe, and where you guys have had very higher ranking nowadays, individuals, several qualifiers now, a couple of years in a row. If you're able to speak to just how that's been, especially as the fruits started to develop here these last 3 years.
Yeah, well, so when I was coaching locally at the high school level, I'd always kind of looked at RIT and their wrestling program and just thought that maybe it was a little under promoted in the wrestling community, because I just watch, as someone who's a resident of Rochester, I'm watching the things that the school is doing academically and the fact that they really have a global footprint on some of the projects that they work on, and some of the work that's given to our students from some pretty high level companies from around the world. So I'm like, wow, man, I think that place would be is a diamond in the rough. And I think that there's a lot of potential there to build a program. So, ultimately, as time went by, and I'd coached at East Rochester High School, and then I went to Pittsford and coached there for a number of years. And then, I'd kind of always had that, that urge to maybe kind of try to coach and at the next level. And that opportunity presented itself. And, we started to really just kind of recruit, some really quality student athletes. Like the three guys you have here are all guys who have, if they don't have a 4.0, they're about as close as you could possibly be. And they're not, we have an accountant, we have a mechanical engineer, and we have a chemical engineer. And all three of them have been captains for me, or one is currently a captain, and two are outgoing captains. So the area, the valley, so to speak, has been very good to me over the years. When you factor these guys in and Caden, it's just really been really good to me. And now over the past few years, we've really Our first year, we did have some new recruits, 7 years ago. And then we had some existing guys that were, pretty motivated and really tough and just wanted to, we're kind of thirsting for that, that training regimen and work ethic and mentality that our staff brought. And, you know, that next year we had a really solid recruiting class, with, they were basically our outgoing class last year, where we had, 3 All-Americans. And, so that class kind of came through um, and they had a lot of success in between. And now these guys who kind of came in on their coattails, so to speak, had another tremendous year. We've had 13 All-Americans in the last 4 years. So, that's something that we're proud of. And, obviously, we want kids who are really strong student athletes know that they don't have to sacrifice, um, academics for athletics or athletics for academics. They can get everything here. And I think probably one of the things that you'll see as a common theme with regard to our program, um, because of the way RIT does things, not that it's just a quality academic institution, but because of the way they structure their academics with required work experience, all these kids have jobs waiting for them and have had jobs waiting for them, some of them for a year now. Which, as a parent of 3 kids in college right now, I want my kids out of the basement at some point and joining the ranks of the gainfully employed. So I know those their chances are significantly enhanced if they graduate from a school like RIT. And there's no more proof than the 3 guys you got sitting in front of you right now. So
Yeah, that concept is invaluable. It always has been in an institution like that. Probably in today's world more than ever of that. I graduate now. What I do, kind of, if you took all colleges generically, but a
sure.
place like this, the guys are plugged into the alumni. I can imagine just how it is. I'm gonna just bounce around to the guys for a minute. Josh, being the youngest that still has his feet in the program, as these guys are kind of on their way out. Just to pose it to you, like when you were looking at schools, did speak to, like, is that one of the things that definitely attracted you to this might be the place for me? That kind of concept of the job force and the alumni base and the connectivity.
Yeah, that was definitely a attractive factor, especially since I knew I wanted to be in STEM and engineering. I knew RIT is a really good school for that, world renowned. And also, I knew Lamb because we'd been wrestling together for a long time. We wrestled at Worldwide doing freestyle and Greco. So I knew him. I was actually sitting at sectionals my senior year, waiting for finals, and Lamb comes up to me and he says, "Hey, you should wrestle for RIT." And I was like, you know what? Maybe you're right. I don't know. I tried it out and haven't looked back since. It's been a great experience. So,
Yeah, it's funny you put that way because, of course, I know a little bit of your guys' connection. I didn't even know that particular point, but I'll pose it to you, Chris. Actually, Coach reference. He's out in the real world, graduating last year. One of your guys' teammates was Caden Winters. I believe even there was a couple other Athens products. You and Caden probably were the most locked in there. And Caden was very successful on the mat. Now he's out in the working world. I imagine you guys are maybe you guys were the same age group or maybe one behind, but going together, knowing some people are there, that means a lot when you're entering that college experience, I imagine.
Oh, definitely. He was a year older than me, so he was there for a little bit before I got there. But being able to like see the success he had at like his first year of college, like he had a great first year, and I remember him like texting me and telling me like about RIT and just like seeing the culture there and being able to like get it from him was pretty big. So he's definitely a big reason I chose to go to RIT.
Yeah, I know. Just, I mean, it reigns true for me. Coach knows a common friend of ours. When I went to where we went, no longer the program exists. Unfortunately, while we were there, it dropped St. Lawrence. But one of the attractive things to me is at the time no longer exists Elmira Southside. Now it's just all Elmira, the Elmira Express. But a wrestler, our common buddy Chris, was an Elmira Southside product that was already there, doing his thing a couple years older. And, on those visits or that connection, it definitely brings you a level of comfort, I imagine. Yeah, Austin, just to bring you into the picture, you I'm thinking of you individually. I know Kate, all you guys did good. I believe. I'm not as familiar with some of your teammates, but I have a half reference. That's all what's in here. But Dempsey King was a high level, at least for getting something at the national tournament level in the end of the year, I believe. And then you had Caden was there, kind of showing that. And all you guys, and maybe Austin most specifically, going into this year, your goals were set, and you had a taste before you got to the national tournament again, and trying to, ride that wave of what's been done before. It's easier when the path's been made, I guess, a little bit. Not easier, but at least you know where you're going with it. Your goals.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? For some reason, you were cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, I was just talking about like the success all the teammates saw before
Yeah.
your Dempsey Kings and Caden, and as you entered and were able to kind of grasp their leadership, do what you had to do on the mat, where you wanted your goals to go. When someone's done it before, it's a little easier to grasp. Hey, man, I could do this at a high level academic school. The actual competition on the mat, just speaking of that, how that was for you, following those trails.
I mean, yeah, those are two guys that I, went to war with every day in the room, and just seeing what they were able to do, it was like, why can't I do that? And just being really committed to your long-term goals and doing everything in your power to achieve those goals and not let any distractions get in your way. I feel like RIT was perfect for that. Just keeps you really disciplined. Everyone on the team is really disciplined. Everyone has the same goals, and that's what I appreciated most about this program.
Yeah. You talked about academics, Coach. All three here were three of your eight. There were eight academic scholars, regardless of success on the mat, right? And these guys were all three on that list.
Yeah, so you got Horton's a 5-timer. So because of the COVID year, he's these guys. Look at Jerry. You knew me when I was in college. It would have taken me 2 semesters to get add up my cum to reach 1 semester of theirs. So I'm a self-aware man. But these guys are super smart. But I think Austin kind of put something out there that maybe I don't want it to go by the wayside. The work ethic in the room with all three of these guys, and it just spreads throughout our whole room. They've witnessed it from guys like you mentioned. Dempsey, kind of picked up that work ethic from a kid like Brad Mayville, right, and Nick Greenquist, and some of those guys that were on the team my first year. And then, then you got Caden and those guys. They come in and they're just workhorses. And I remember specifically Austin's freshman year. We're we put guys in groups each day to train, and Austin wanted to be right in the middle of that fire. You know what I mean? He's like, Coach, I didn't get to go with Caden and Dempsey today. Can you make sure I'm in their group? So it's that type of stuff. That's the type of kid I feel like we're recruiting. And these guys are just driven, they're motivated, and they're really kind of the total package. They're where me, kind of wrestling was everything and academics were secondary. And if I was tired, that my class was going to suffer that day, not my practice, right? Where these guys, they just nutritionally, they live the life. They make the right decisions during the year and what they put in their body. Academically, they live the life. Everything that we talk about and all the cliches that you hear, people talk about, while you're scrolling through Instagram or whatever. I get to witness it every day with a huge percentage of my team. It's just the type of kid that that we attract at our school. And, I'm really just kind of, I get positive accolades for it as a coach, but it's really just a byproduct of the type of kids these kids are and the way that they've been raised. So while I'm fortunate to work with them, and I enjoy it, they're just great kids, and it just carries through everything that they do in their college experience and their student athlete experience. So just fortunate.
Yeah, and we could be here for some time if I was to go over every little detail of all three's high school careers. But I know they all came from quality competitive programs when you're dealing with the high school level, individually had success at state level and sectional or district, those qualifier levels in high school. I mean, because we're here, we know their programs. But I know the reality, and them guys probably did too. As much as you had those tools in your toolbox, it's a different program when you get guys that are, from Massachusetts and California, and at a school like this, and you had the other competitors that are already there doing it, like Dempsey and Caden and all the above that we've mentioned. It's easier said than done to make that transition. Like just going around, I'll just kind of guide you through. Maybe Austin speak to it. When you think back to what you were had in your experience bucket coming out of the Tioga program, what would you look back at? What helped you, be it family or the difference in the room or whatever the attitude was going from that to the RIT culture?
I mean, really, it's as simple as this: the ones that wanted to be great did made the correct steps to ultimately reach the level they wanted to. John and Brady Worthing were both huge training partners to me. We were the group that wrestled year round. Went to all these practices, all these tournaments, and they're now wrestling at the Division I level. John just qualified, but I think just being around a group like that growing up and coming into a program that is exactly like that, just amped up a little bit. I was prepared. I knew what to expect coming in, I think, is what I'll say.
Yeah, and as I transition to Chris, like as you guys going out into the world now, kind of finishing your careers on the mat anyway. I know Josh has got some more time, but you'll see years from now, those relationships and cultures that you work together. Coach knows we're going to a reunion this summer where there's many multiple guys that you don't see year in year out, but you talk a little bit, and when you do get together, it's like, hey guys, you remember back when? And it's the fun, but it's even the work. Remember in the room and these kind of things. Besides, what value you got from the working career. What about you, Chris? Back to the Wildcat room and what Coach Bradley and all you guys were doing down there, and how that got to the into the room at the D3 level.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Bradley and Jay White, both fantastic coaches, and every day in that room we pretty much like went to war. We had some killer practices, and we were always prepared in high school, and I think that kind of transitioned well to RIT because I had a similar style, like always working, not like talking during practice or anything, always pushing the pace in practice because you wrestle on the mat how you wrestle in practice. So that was kind of the two mentalities I had in high school and in college. So it kind of transitioned well, and we just worked hard both in high school and college, and that's all I can really say is both hardworking programs and great coaches, both programs, and I'm just very fortunate to have the people that allowed me to further my career.
Yeah, amen. Now, Josh, coming out of Newark Valley, were you under Coach Daly, or was it? I know there was a transition time.
I was under both of them. So I was under Coach Darcy and Zecchi, and then it switched to Daly. So yeah, I came into high school in 7th grade, so I got to watch guys like Derek Holcomb and Trevor Hoffmeyer wrestle, and they kind of set the precedent for what the work ethic had to be in the room, and even through that transfer, we kind of kept that work ethic, And obviously, when I came to college, the level of partners you have just increases drastically. Like you said, you got people from all over the place. Funny enough, my practice partner was Chris, though, who's only 40 minutes down the road or whatever. But he was a great partner too. So just getting to come into practice every day and grind it out and just work towards our goals. That's something I learned when I was very young. So just continuing that in college.
Now, just to exhaust the time with you guys before I let you go, I'll just keep with you, Josh, just for a moment. Because as I understand it, you might be becoming someone in a captain's role going into these subsequent time here, going up next season. And these guys both held that kind of leadership role, I guess, at times, different times. What would you speak to just what you saw with what they did and what you want to do with it? Just helping coach lead, the team through a season.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely been a culture that's been set here at RIT where you're held to a higher standard. And I've seen that ever since I was a freshman with our captains back then. These guys followed that same precedent. And I plan on continuing that, obviously. And yeah, I'm excited to just continue the culture and build upon that and improve and continue our processes.
Just to keep Coach awake, because I know it's been a full day, even though we're going to have time together. But briefly, Coach, because then we'll watch these guys' time. Just touch on it, just for people that will be watching this later that might be unfamiliar with RIT. I'll just set the stage. I mean, right now, you've got you guys and these guys that are doing the work every day in the room and the people before them and after, the culture as a whole, your staff too. I know you have very good individuals there that help toe the rock. You guys now are in that mix of, academics for sure. It's there if you want it. But now some consistency and the quality of that D3 competitiveness. I know when we were in school, RIT was there, but was kind of fluttering. You wouldn't have thought like, oh, RIT is going to be super competitive. In our day, it was similar now. You have your Ithacas and you have your Cortlands, and you have those all the Augsburgs and the Wartburgs have been there forever today. When you look at the national, but RIT wouldn't have been thought of. Now I imagine in all the equivalents of these guys in other campuses, like whoa, we got RIT. I mean, it's a big difference. What I wanted to pose to you is, I know that's just to testify to it, but in the history of RIT, there's been some individuals that somewhat the Hammer, right? There is it Matt Hamill. I was ready to say Mark Hamill because it's May the 4th. Speak to just that history there, ever so briefly. Somebody that'd be totally clueless to just the athletic history there.
Yeah, so the program's been around since 1927. Matter of fact, one of the wrestling coaches was actually served as the president of the college for a period of time. Yeah. So the program's been around for a long time. There's been some great, like you said, some great individuals, and there's been some good teams. There was an undefeated team, I believe, in the late 50s.
I saw that in the 50s there was a 12-win season, and then one of your guys' recent season was a 12-win, and they tied.
Yeah. Year 3 was yeah. So it's a storied program. We got a lot of proud alumni, and they're guys who I've made more of an effort to really reach out to and involve in our program, and just our alumni Facebook page. It's a private page, but these guys are all in it. For example, we had a kid who needed a co-op. I put it on the alumni Facebook page, and he had 2 offers within 5 minutes. It's just that our alumni are very, very successful. These guys are going to be alumni that are going to be very, very successful. The stage is set for them already. We had 10 kids graduate last year. They're all, every school can kind of give you, their top. Oh, well, we got this guy who's doing this. I can give you everybody. Everybody's doing very well who graduates from here. And because of our co-op program, they start at positions where other people got to work for, 2-3 years to climb the ranks. our guys are eligible for positions like that because of their experiences here right at graduation. So, so there's kind of been some ebb and flow with regard to success over those years. But like I said, for me, with my club and my contacts as a high school coach, we started to get some early momentum recruiting. And look, it's just like anything. When you're trying to sell, you cast your vision, right? So I had my vision for what I wanted this program to be. Like, I don't ever want to be a program where we're bringing in 6 to 10 transfers every year, because that wasn't an experience that we had, when we were in college, right? I hold our experience very close to my heart. Obviously, it's a big part of my life. These guys can speak to the fact that they were recruited and came in as freshmen. They've spent 4 and 5 years together, and they've developed a bond with the seniors when they were freshmen to the freshmen when they were seniors and everybody in between. And and I think that that's special. Now, maybe that's not the philosophy that will get us, you know to the national championship as a team, but I'm going to try to win, and I'm going to try to aspire to that level doing it this way. And if we can, great. If we fall short, we're going to fall short with some unbelievable relationships that these guys are going to have with each other, that's going to span across decades. And like, we're getting ready, Jerry, we're getting ready to have a reunion. There'll be 60 to 80 people there, and St. Lawrence hasn't had a program since 1995. And they're
Right.
still, what I mean? So those are the types of connections that I want these guys to have, because you're not in 10 years, they're not going to talk about who won or who lost a duel or a tournament or whatever. They're going to be talking about all sorts of different stuff that they experienced together, just like we did. And that's what I want for them. And they're all going to be successful, and they're going to be creating great opportunities for their families because of what they're going to be able to do, because of the way they're compensated. Um, and it's just a life-changing decision when you make this decision to go to college, that I take very seriously. Like, if you talk to Mr. Horton or the Lambs, at our banquet this year, you know, one of the things I said to him was like, thank you for trusting me with your son.
Yeah.
Because that's, I know what I hold near and dear to my heart is family, and they trusted me with their son, and I don't take that for granted. Every kid who comes into our program, I don't I don't minimize that, the weight of that. When you send your kid off to college, I feel like I owe it to them to do right by their kid, and I just hope that that they feel that they made a great decision. And judging by the opportunities that they have out in front of them, you know at least that part of it was a good one. So
Yeah. To talk that old cliche of the grind of wrestling, and once you've wrestled, everything else is easier, but it's a reality. You two men that are about to hit the workforce here in just a handful of months, that what do you anticipate of the work you've put in and the sweat you might have done on a Thursday afternoon because you're going to a big tournament that was just a brutal grind. But what's it going to bring when you're, doing that important project to the next step of your career, whatever may take place? How do you anticipate that'll translate, Chris?
Yeah, it definitely translates pretty well. I think just wrestling on top of like going to RIT, like the school itself, it's a challenging, whatever major you do, it's going to be challenging. We're a good school. So just wrestling and then doing classes on top of that, it was a grind. And now that I don't have wrestling anymore, it's like, wow, I got a lot more free time, and it helps focus. I can put more focus on my work and stuff and schoolwork and everything, but it definitely carries over, and it's definitely on a Thursday afternoon. If you don't want to do it, you realize I would go to practice every day and grind for 2 hours, and this is nothing compared to that. So it's definitely carries over, definitely makes life so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, Austin, just to touch on you being in the same boat, I know probably as you guys went through your 4, if not 5 year graduate work that you done, Chris, and that COVID times we all lived through, so you had those opportunities. But when you think back to when you're a freshman, regardless of your hunger, but just you as a person, now that you're about to step foot in the real world, do you look back, either one of you, but I'm just posing it to Austin more so right now, that kind of where you've come as a human being under this umbrella of the RIT experience, like time management, just security, what have you. I mean, that value's definitely been out in this real world.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been part of 2 great programs that have taught me more than just wrestling. It's getting me ready for life. Just very fortunate to have that along the way. And I don't, yeah, like Chris just said, it's going to translate over very well. Because those extra workouts that you don't want to do because you have to get off a couple more pounds. That's way harder than grinding out a deadline that you have to do. So I'm just very very appreciative of the RIT wrestling program in general, and looking forward to seeing what's next.
Yeah, I mean, there's truth in it as much as any cliches, but I believe, compared to if it was any other sport, student athlete, it's time management, it's getting through 4 years of anything. But I think all of us would agree this sport, like no other, just molds you into something that's been able to hold up to the rigors of the real world. And you guys are kind of coming to discover that now. I just want to, I want to thank you guys and appreciate you. Because time wise, I'm going to touch on a few things that Coach probably doesn't even want you to hear now, because he doesn't want his own horn tooted. But just because it's a wrestling podcast, I'm going to talk about a little of his personal career. And I respect you guys having some work to do, etc. But as you leave, Josh, you say what you think here. So this is an old school picture of Coach. I'm sure it was just caught at the right time. But was he watching clock a little bit in this photo, or not? I don't know if you guys can see that. I think maybe he was watching clock a little.
Yeah, he was gassed for sure.
Definitely.
Or
he was tired out.
Hammer that guy over. I don't know. That's but I just like that with, as Coach said, you guys are going to fast forward 25 years from now and be a reunion type sense. But half, if not all those guys, this is one of our years. I think this is my my freshman year, and he was a junior there, I think. But just the camaraderie you'll see in people that forever and ever. And it's more, as he said, less wins and losses, but more, hey, you remember when we were heading to that tournament? In that example, Coach, up here, I found this when I was just looking for gear and stuff, and I was back home. And this is an ankle bracelet. It says on it Ithaca College Wrestling, and it's from my freshman year at the Ithaca Invitational. I don't even know how I have it and why, but it says in the Sharpie, Ithaca College Wrestling. So it's just those little reminders and memories like that. But yeah, gentlemen, Josh, I appreciate your time. Chris, I know all your programs at home, viewers will be watching by way of Newark Valley, Athens, and Tioga, all still doing strong things this day. A testament to the kind of people that they build, bring to the table. I really appreciate you guys, and thank you for being here. And unless you have anything to add, we'll bid you adieu so you can finish those rigors of the academics, and Coach and I will chat on a few subjects of wrestling and go about our day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Coach. So, yeah, thanks so much for doing this. And, yeah, I know you don't care about that. I didn't mean to.
No, it's no problem. But let me tell you, those 3 guys are they're just amazing, and they've had such an unbelievable impact on our program. And you go through their high school programs and their high school coaches, and as a college coach that when you can pull someone from one of those programs whose coach each coaching staff that kind of had them mention are just so amazing. You know that they're well schooled in the basics. You know that they're high character kids, and you just know that they're tough, right? So, um, Coach Daly, he was over at Deposit Hancock before he went to Newark Valley, and we had Colby Hall, who's another tier guy, so that's kind of how I got um, hooked up with Josh, was through Colby, through Coach Daly, and then Josh came along, and then I take my club team down to the Athens duels every year, and you see the guys from Athens. So when I made the transition from coaching high school to college, and you see those guys wrestling, you're like, so you start kicking the tires down there, and Jay's uh, Jay's son David White is brilliant. So he knew and had a respect for RIT and its academics, and so did Sean Bradley, who's kind of living in that world right now, and they employ some RIT guys and get some guys from RIT to co-op with the company he works with. So, Chris Harrington, obviously is doing a good job, and he puts his time in with kids, year in and year out, and and not just during the season, but 12 months a year. So, when you can get those types of kids in the room from programs like that, you're just that foundational work is done. And as someone who's been a former high school coach, and you watch some of these kids come in the room from various programs, and the kids have really achieved quite a lot, but some of the basics just with some of them are just not there yet. And so it's almost like you're doing a lot of teaching, and you got to really, really be smart with the way you utilize your time, and be smart with what you teach and when, because with Division 3, we don't get to work with them, 12 months a year, like 11 months a year, like they do at some of the other levels. So, um, so if you can kind of get a lot of that foundational work done by bringing them, recruiting kids from programs that they're going to get that base, that wrestling base that kids need to have. A lot of that work can be done for you before they get in the room. So definitely
Yeah.
feel blessed to have kids from those programs in my program.
Kind of connecting, it relates to the program. I know because I've heard you speak on it when we just chatted around buddies and watching it. And I know a little bit of the backdrop of you in the sense of, I believe I'm correct, right? I mean, being real, you did big things, which we'll touch on in a minute, just for viewers that are all about wrestling. Not that I know you're not one to rah rah all the time, but you know, you as a high school wrestler and what you look for now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're looking for whoever might fit the mold of an RIT athlete. But your eyes definitely open, I think, when you see that not quite tapped out potential, that extra worker, that person that's looking to just gain a little more. Maybe they're even a late bloomer about to really explode because their work ethic's just catching up to their maybe their ability or what resources they've had to push themselves forward. Because you yourself, even though, which we're going to touch on, you're one. Maybe it's not the only time, but you won 2 national championships at the level you're coaching now, D3, at 2 different colleges, at our alumnus St. Lawrence, and because our program dropping and the timing of when you had nursed an injury through, you had that opportunity to complete eligibility and did the same back at Ithaca College there. Um, but in the high school times, not that you weren't good, but you weren't at that level then. Where you were still kind of what I'd call developing, because, right? Am I wrong? I've heard you say that before in kind of your junior, senior year.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you take a look at my experience, it's probably very different than most of the kids who are achieving at a high level, whether regardless of the division. Um, my parents never knew anything about wrestling, and really were not sports people per se. They just made sure that their boys did everything they wanted to do, and my brother and I, did end up getting into sports. And I started wrestling in ninth grade. For a school that really wasn't they had a team, I always knew I wanted to try it. I was a 119-pound freshman in high school, and going to a program that maybe, I don't know, won 4 or 5 matches a year, right? Some Catholic school I went to that has since closed. But so I wrestled there my first 2 years, and from the moment I did it, I just fell in love with the sport. I just loved the combat. I loved, the personal accountability. Um, I remember losing my first wrestle off my freshman year and not being, I couldn't wait to get back to practice the next day because, sometimes with team sports, there's a lot of subjectivity with regard to who, gets the bulk of the playing time. Um, and maybe that was difficult for me to understand why, in basketball I wasn't playing or football or whatever, or soccer or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but in wrestling, um, the feedback was right there. I didn't win, so I got to figure it out. So that the reality of that was attractive to me. Um, so, but I again, I loved it. And as soon as the season was over, I'm picking up, back in the day, they didn't have the internet, right? So you'd go to a tournament and there'd be flyers out on the tables. So I would just go, and every tournament I went to, I'd pick up flyers, and that would be something for the next thing. And there was a club. Okay, I'm going to start going to club. And then there's a camp. I'm going to go to camp. Oh, by the way, there's a freestyle tournament. And I remember going to my first freestyle tournament, maybe having 1 or 2 practices under my belt with regard to the style. And I had 2 guys that were in this, one guy who went to states and one guy who, lost by a point to that guy. And they're both in my weight class. And I spent maybe about a minute and a half total on the mat because, I got, teched out in no time, but I just sat in the bleachers with my dad, who's just there reading the paper as I would go, because he'd go with me everywhere, anywhere I wanted to go. And, I would just watch and I would learn. And I couldn't, whether, I learned you don't want to be, you know, doing a stand up in a Greco match because, you kind of
Yeah.
get, so that mistake happened one time, so you learn quickly. But if there's whatever the style, I would wrestle it. If it was beach wrestling, you wrestle it. If it was freestyle, you wrestle it. Folk style, Greco, it was just wrestling to me. So you just went and did it. And I think that I just loved it. So I think in that time, starting as a JV kid, as a freshman, and then transition into varsity, and then again going to camps, I would wrestle, probably 60, 70 matches every off season. I would go to everything I could. I would go to camps, a lot of commuter camps because we didn't have a lot of money, so it was difficult, obviously for us. But I'd make use of Bill Jackto would have started doing these commuter camps at Spenceport and having open mats there, and I would go, and I would, I would just wrestle and get on the mat anytime I could, and I think I went 13-11 as a sophomore, and then junior year you used to be able to tie. So my junior year I went 28-5-3 and lost by 2 in the semifinals of the state qualifiers, and we didn't have wrestlebacks in our section at the time. And then the next year, that kid that I lost to the year before, I beat to go the next year, and I took fourth in the state. And now the state at my weight class that year was really deep and really tough. You got Emilio Collins who won it. It was a 2-time Division I All-American. For Michigan State, took a third and a fourth in the Division Ones. Seamus Lyman was a 3-time finalist, so those are guys that, I was close to, but I just wasn't able to beat him yet. And, then, I went to St. Lawrence, and then, even physically, um, I grew quite a bit. Uh, even at St. Lawrence, I grew 2 inches my freshman year, probably put on 20 pounds in the first 2 months, eating college food and lifting and all that stuff. But so I just became, I think, more athletic, and I continued to wrestle all summer doing camps and clinics and all that stuff. So I kind of never stopped, but I don't know. I just
The
kind of
common,
felt.
you mentioned it, but the common theme there is what I was alluding to. Just it doesn't always have to be that super duper blue chipper, especially now with, you always value it, of course, but you can still see those people that have the hunger in their eyes. They're ready to work for it because they haven't quite attained it yet. Probably that's the kind of athlete you definitely circle in your wanna list if they can meet the rigors of the RT experience, etc. But that hunger, I guess, is what I was getting at. I knew that was a theme too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I wanted to be good. When I walked onto St. Lawrence's campus, when Coach Clark recruited me, I just told him, I want to go Division 1. I don't really, um, not sure if I want to go Division 3. And from being around him, like he could recruit anybody. He's an unbelievable salesman, which is
Yeah,
why they had the quality program that they had. That the athletes that he recruited, throughout his time there, that were guys that were Division 1 guys. Like another guy from your neck of the woods. Todd Northrup.
right.
I mean, Todd Northrup had it narrowed down between two schools. It was St. Lawrence and it was Iowa. I mean,
Yeah,
it doesn't even make sense, right? But that's
right.
the recruiting prowess that Coach Clark had. And he had guys like Phil Lanzatella, who was an alternate on the 1980 Olympic team at his freshman year of college, right? Mike Connors, the Mitch Brown, Ron Pellegrin, all these guys, in a probably 15-year window, they had 9 national champions.
Yeah,
Um, they won a national title. Now they don't have a program, right? But at any rate, he could recruit guys that were really, Division 1 talent and convince them to go there. So, he did the same thing to me, and I don't regret it for 1 second. I mean, I had an amazing time there. And from when I walked on campus, I noticed that no one had ever won the nationals twice. So that became my goal, when I was there. So, you
and
know,
which leads us to, as you well know, we both lived it during my reference point is in my junior year. It was essentially your senior year, though you were hobbled and injured with a shoulder nagging injury. So it was already going to be iffy your ability to really be 100%. But here they dropped the program going into that 1 year.
yeah,
A lot of we could go into it. Me and you both know, just one of those things, political, whatever, just a product of the times. But you were able to take that opportunity and land because you were serious about it. You wanted that goal. You
right.
landed it and became a national champion there. Two different schools. I'm just underscoring again a national championship twice over at the Division 3 level, two-time national champion. Um, you might touch on that and whatever you might speak to, go ahead. I want to bring up Sutton because the ears might be on a local because I know he was at least a competitive practice partner, a friend of mine, alumni, Mr. James Howie. He had, if I know, I don't have his personal history memorized, but he had done some time in the Army, had kept loose with wrestling, came into Ithaca as kind of a little bit older student because he was coming off from the military service. And he jumped in the program to get his wrestling shoes going again. He came out of our Waverly court. Now he's in our local Sayre as another successful person, administrator here in the neighboring Sayre school district. But just speak to a couple minutes if you have a story that's G-rated or something, or whatever else about your Ithaca experience.
Yeah, well, look, Jim that's a name I haven't heard in a while, but when you brought it up, it definitely, brings a smile to my face because I just remember what a great guy he was. And yeah, we had a couple guys, him and Ron Long were a couple guys who were military guys who had gotten out and continued to wrestle. And really what I look at when I think about those guys, like what the heck were they doing, wrestling when they were wrestling? What the heck was I doing after getting, my initial school dropped the program. I had my shoulder done. All this, every sign, was given to you to just walk away. But the sport, it's infectious, right? So you just want to do it as long as you can, and that's why, like if I I joke around with Lonnie Morris, who's the coach at Johnson and Wales. We're a couple of old dudes now, but we like to think like if we found out somehow, some way that we had a semester left, we obviously know in our minds there's no way we could do it, but your mind would start to think, could I do it? So it's just,
Yeah.
I would just, and so Jim, was just one of those guys, right? He had the opportunity to transition or maybe segue out of the sport, and he wasn't done with it. You know, Jim didn't want to shoot on your legs in practice. Jim wanted to throw you. He's going to
Yeah.
hook up. He was going to pummel. He's going to arm throws and all this stuff. But it was fun. It was fun to work out with a guy like that. It definitely was a different look. But I definitely have fond memories of him, and he's a gentleman, and I remember liking him a lot. So.
Yeah. Obviously, Ithaca today, people you ended up becoming teammates that you competed with and people you knew from here and there. Because a name that comes to mind, and we'll end up winding it down. You had a long day. I was just trying to get a little bit more substance from you, Coach. But Steve Farr was one of your competitors sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Now, was he going the time you landed, or were you got? I forget the timing there because he's a Johnson City product. Right here, which in my heyday, Waverly and Johnson City were like this, top tier and competitors. His father and my father actually were IBMers, if you will, so I knew
Okay.
the name. But it's just something to bring up about the Ithaca times. Was he gone as you landed by the time you landed with the Ithaca colors on?
Yeah. So Steve, the first year I won it in '93, Steve took third, and we wrestled each other in the quarters. And he actually a couple weeks before that beat me by a point in the conference finals. But he took third in 1993, and then in 1994 when I had my shoulder done, he won it. And he actually it came down to his match against the wrestler from Wartburg, who obviously I crossed over with. I wrestled him in '92 in the Consi semis, the nationals, but. When it came down between both of those guys in the finals, and whoever won that match, their team won the team title.
Oh
And
wow!
and yeah, I mean, so high drama there, and obviously, it goes to overtime, and Steve won. Steve got the takedown in overtime, but Steve is he was an amazing athlete, an explosive, powerful guy. So, but yeah, but he was one of the reasons why I went to Ithaca because he had graduated in '94, but we had conversations that we had wanted to train and go, to the U.S. Open and wrestle freestyle, and we were going to train together. And then as I got to Ithaca and started to train, and he was working, and I think his life started to take a different direction with regard to competing. Um,
Yeah,
so that didn't end up working out. And then at the end of that year, I dislocated my shoulder again um, in the quarterfinals of the Nationals. Like it came out, stayed out. Coach Murray's sitting there kind of boxing out the official so he can't see my shoulder as our trainer's like trying to put it back in. But she got it back in, and I finished the tournament. But that kind of put a kibosh on any other wrestling I was going to be doing. It was time for retirement. So
yeah.
yeah,
I can only imagine that. Yeah.
yeah.
Hey, to kind of tie a ribbon on everything, I want to end with a couple things I always do in the podcast, just brief little things. Even a third that's on my mind because of something going on in the real time of the world. But before we do that, um, briefly, because I want to get you out of here, just to again talk about what you're looking for in a RIT guy and the culture you've built there, what you'd want to see with somebody that might be listening and be like, God, I want to follow an engineering path or whatever other subject, and their eyes are kind of looking at an RIT.
Well, yeah. So obviously, when you're recruiting, you want, kids who are talented, kids who are motivated, and kids who aren't going to be, an issue academically, right? So when I start, a lot of times I'll go through coaches before I even talk to a kid, but the questions go, like this, what kind of what does he want to do and what kind of student is he? because if we can't get past that, it's just pointless. There's lots of talented kids. I went to the high school nationals a couple weeks ago to watch, and it's like, boy, how do you recruit? It's like I can't go through and watch a kid who's super talented and kind of fall in love with how tough he is and what his potential could be at RIT unless I know how is he academically and what are his academic interests and does he love the sport? Because I love it. I love every day at practice. Like I met with the captains the other day. I'm excited about the challenge that lies before us next year. I love our incoming recruiting class, and I just can't wait, to get to work with them. Right. So I mean that's kind of where my mind is all the time. And one of the things that I did not love about coaching high school sometimes is maybe those kids who wrestled for the wrong reasons. Maybe they had a dad that was pushing them and they didn't really love it. And that kind of brought me down, because I never walked into a practice like that. I always loved to be there. Like I told you, it's like if I was having, if I wasn't feeling great, on a given day where we had a practice scheduled, I was going to get the rest I needed so I could get to practice because I just loved everything about it and loved being there. So those are the type of student athletes I want. I want a kid who's obviously, checks the box academically, but they still love it and they still have some aspirations, you know, um, and love being there and love the grind. And like those three guys that you just had on, I never had to get on any of them one time about their work ethic in all the years they've been there, and I mean each one of them. They love this sport. It's in their blood, and I think that love of it comes from the programs that they've been raised in, and just the relationship they have with the sport. So, I mean, those are the type of kids that I want. And if they can't answer, that question that I'm like, Coach, does he love it? Because the kid will tell you, oh yeah, I love it. Because they just want to be recruited or whatever. But you have your tentacles as a coach kind of go a little bit further than just the kid and his parents, right? So you ask his coach, you ask kids maybe that or coaches that compete against him in that league. You when you recruit, you try to get a good picture of each kid that you recruit, and before you bring them in, because our chemistry is something that's very special to our team and it's very special to me, and we want to keep that we want to keep that going. Like I told you, we had 10 kids graduate last year, and only two of them were starters. When eight kids, are not starters and go through your program and can't imagine their college experience without being part of the team, I think that's something that's pretty special. And those guys are appreciated, and our guys who are achieving and going to national tournaments and placing, they also know that that's not possible without every single one of those guys in the room that's there to support them. I'll give you a quick story about Austin. Austin and one of his teammates, James Ost, both, are graduating this year, but both have eligibility left, but both are graduating this year. Um, they they got a class that they needed to graduate. They just the professor just changed it last minute. So they had to miss Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for the whole second semester this year. Okay. So you take like Austin. Austin, came into the season in amazing shape as a captain. He does everything that you have to do. 3 weeks in, he tears a ligament in his big toe. So he's out until the RIT invite. Goes in the RIT invite, beats a returning All-American in the finals, comes back, and everything's going great. Second semester, we go to the national duels. He beats a kid who was fourth in the country the year before from Co. And then he gets a concussion, out for another 3 weeks. So I think he had maybe 10 or 12 matches all year going into the national qualifier, and compound that with the fact that he couldn't participate in our regularly scheduled practices 3 days a week,
Because of that.
because of that
Right.
schedule change. But I bring that up because every other guy on the team, maybe who wasn't a starter, made themselves available to those guys to work out with at different times throughout the day, that they were available, and guys who are not starters going to make sure, those guys are going to get 2 practices in that day. They're going to work out with Austin and James, and Coach Peacock makes it in early so that and he puts them through a workout and everything. So they were getting workouts, but it's nothing like the team workout when you're there with everybody. But that was his
Right.
second semester. So, and that was his senior season. He loses by a point in the quarters, he loses by a point in the blood round. But I feel
Yeah.
like things weren't ideal for him, and Austin would never tell you that story, because to Austin, that's an excuse. But
Right.
I'll tell you that story because it's a reason, and that kid's as talented as anyone in the country. And I think if everything fell his way this year, which it didn't, he could have won the whole thing. He's that
Right.
good. When you saw him wrestle in bursts, getting after it, even at the national tournament, those last 10 seconds, getting in on 2, 3 shots in the last 10 seconds. He just didn't have it all together, like he could have. And it's unfortunate, but he's got no regrets. He's a 2-time
Right.
national qualifier. He's an All-American. That'll be with him the rest of his life. Multiple time Scholastic All-American. But but the fact that our team, rallies around that situation and make sure he gets the workouts he needs, um, says a lot about the type of kid that we have in our program. So
It does. That's for sure.
yeah.
That's amazing. I want to make sure I mention. I appreciate your time. It's been a long day, and definitely thank the family, if you will, the wife. I think maybe the kids are off in their own academics and whatnot, because they're in those collegiate years now. But because I know it's the time as you arrive home.
Yeah.
But just to complete a quick, it'll be 2 minutes ish. Is that both of us plugged into this community indirectly from our time and just in the upstate New York world. I know there was a tragedy in the Fulton, New York. I don't know if you saw that, where there was a wrestler and his girlfriend, a young lady, a car accident. She was killed. He's a budding wrestler that's grown a hunger for it, that's clinging to his life, I believe, with some brain injury. And so I think it's just National Prayer Day in general. So maybe it's meant to be. I just want to take 2 seconds, 2 to 3 seconds of silence just for us to kind of put a prayer out to that young man in that Fulton wrestling community, that Fulton community, upstate New York. Yeah, thanks, Coach. But hey, one last thing too, just for people that might have their eyes on that, Waverly here, my hometown, and not your hometown, but your community there. You guys still live in the HFL district, is where you reside, correct? And your kids went there.
Yeah. Yep.
Falls Lima. So in the football world, Waverly and them are scheduled for week 0 this coming season as playing down here in Waverly. Waverly's had kind of a traditional program here and lately, and must be. It sounded like I saw a little bit of how they did last year. That they wouldn't take the schedule if they weren't pretty quality. But it's an interesting thing that I noticed when a couple weeks ago it was publicized locally. We got this team coming out of Section 5, so they're playing football. They call it week 0 now. Like somehow they can get an extra one in.
Oh, okay.
They play Tauga week 2, who it's like they've never played in many years.
Who Waverly does?
Waverly and
Okay.
Tauga are playing in week 2, so it's kind of a competitive little deal there, as you know.
Yeah.
Competitive sports program for such a small school. And yeah, thank you again for it. I love putting a highlight on the Division III level and our connection and our times. I always want to leave the podcast with 2 things. Gosh, Evan, I'm in a brain lapse here today. Help me out because you even know of him. At Chris Seymour's alumnus, his freestyle coach, a referee. Gosh, I'm having a brain fart today.
Mark?
Yeah, Mark Stevens.
Yeah.
This is a long day for me too.
Yeah.
So Mr. Mark Stevens has passed, and I knew him well enough to know, and I just have been ending the podcast always as a phrase that he would always say was "in the spirit of the sport." And another way I've been finishing the podcast is my high school coach, Jim McClough, that we lost this past now too. And those 2 behind the scenes were good buddies. They would definitely share a beer when they'd go in the off season and stuff. And Coach McClough, around the holidays especially, but really many a times a year, how he'd leave us many a practice. He'd very specifically say, "Gentlemen, go home and hug your mom." So I just always say that to, I know we may or may not have our moms at our ages. I believe maybe your mom's passed, I believe.
Yeah.
But in spirit, or go hug the wife anyway, and thank her for taking the time out. And I appreciate you. And thanks so much for joining us on this.
Oh, thanks for doing this, Jared. Happy to do it anytime.
All right. Don't hang up, but I'm going to take us off recording here.
Gotcha.